the day before yesterday, we had Donald Trump coming out and talking about sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine and, threatening India, China. Even he said India promised him not to buy China, Russian oil. And yesterday there was a phone call. Vladimir Putin called Donald Trump, and here is what Donald Trump said in terms of the use of Tomahawk missiles and sending them to Ukraine.
About it a little bit, didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them, too.
But did President Putin try to dissuade you from selling Tomahawk missiles?
Well, of course. What do you think he's going to say? Please sell Tomahawks?
No, but did he give
Is he going to say, please sell those Tomahawks? I really appreciate it. I did actually say, would you mind if I gave a couple of thousand Tomahawks to your opposition? I did say that to him. I said it just that way. He didn't like the idea. He really didn't like the idea. No, I said it that way. You have to be a little bit lighthearted sometimes, but no, he doesn't want Tomahawk is a vicious weapon. It's a vicious, offensive, incredibly destructive weapon. Nobody wants Tomahawk shot at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry, go ahead.
I know what he's talking about. But
That's an absolute lie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a point weapon, unless it's got a nuclear warhead.
Yeah, have Andrei Martyanov. He did an analysis the other day, pointing out that he pulled up the map of one refinery, just one refinery in Russia, and Andrei's got a good math background as a result of his military education. He calculated it would take a minimum of 100 Tomahawks to destroy that oil refinery, to render it inoperative. 100. We don't have 100. Trump, the most he could possibly scrape up would maybe 50. So this is going to do nothing other than perhaps irritate the Russians. And what it will do is, if he does deploy it, it is going to create enormous political pressure in Russia for Russia to strike back, and strike back at the United States. Not just strike back at Ukraine, but strike back at the United States, because this will be seen as another direct attack by the United States on Russia. So that much, I'm certain.
Colonel, I don't know the quality of these talks that Donald Trump is having with Vladimir Putin, but the outcome every time that there is a phone call, there is a meeting, he says that it was all productive, positive, but in a couple of days, you see Donald Trump changing totally the tone, the outcome that he was talking about it in the aftermath. What is going on with the United States under the Trump administration?
The same thing normally goes on with it. He brags, he boasts, he says things, retracts them the next day often. And the things that he says, and even when he retracts them, don't really mean very much. And just back to Tomahawk for a minute, I've belabored this with dozens of people, but Tomahawk is a point attack weapon. It's for bunkers and things like that in its conventional stage. Out in the Pacific, when we got it in the early 80s, we didn't even want it, because our mission was to distract the Western Front Russians, Soviets who were attacking, and make them divert forces to Kamchatka, Sea of Okhotsk, places like that. And we knew that Tomahawk wouldn't do that. So we wanted the D model, the nuclear warhead model. Vesey and Reagan disapproved it for obvious political reasons, but that's what we wanted for our war plan. Fast forward to today, not much has changed in Tomahawk. There have been a few upgrades, but it's still a point weapon. Trump shot 52 at Syria, forewarned the Russians that he was going to do that, to be true. But the damage was such that we couldn't even detect it on satellite photography unless we look really, really closely. You don't get a whole lot with Tomahawk, except you threaten nuclear weapons, because it's when it's flying in on you, you don't know what kind of war it is. And that's very destabilizing. As to Trump, he's meeting with Zelensky, as I understand it today. He's just had his very productive telephone conversation with Putin. What's he going to tell Z-Boy? That's the big question. What's he going to tell him? Is he going to be rough with him? Is he going to be middle of the road with him? Is he going to be easy with him? Is he going to tell him more lies? What's he going to do? This man doesn't know how to negotiate. This man of the deal, this man of the art of the deal, doesn't know how to negotiate, let alone know history and how to effect decent diplomacy. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Larry, the problem, it seems, that is Europeans. It's not Zelensky himself, because Zelensky, I don't see Donald Trump caring about Zelensky and his administration. But what is the main problem is the European case, the Europeans somehow pushing for the continuation of the conflict.
Right. Well, but they have no capability to support it. You know, they don't have an industrial capability. They have very, very limited military capabilities. Nothing that could cause any kind of change on the battlefield. And you know, I think it's important that you know, again, there's going to be this raising of expectations in the West about, you know, what's going to happen in Budapest next week. Putin's position is very, very simple, and it's not complicated, and he's not going to surrender on any of these points. Point number one, that the West must recognize Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk as permanent parts of the Federal Republic of Russia, as well as Crimea. Crimea is now permanently part of Russia. Recognize that. Agree that there will be no role for NATO whatsoever in Ukraine, and that NATO forces will be withdrawn from Ukraine going forward. You know, those are the two critical demands. And then the third one will be that there have to be new elections. There have to be elections finally in Ukraine, but not with the Banderites, you know, the neo-Nazis in charge. And if Trump or any of his advisors think that, you know, Putin can be convinced to relent on any of those points, they don't know Putin. I mean, frankly, if Putin made any of those kinds of concessions, he might very well be overthrown. But that you know, it's not going to happen. You know, Putin is not the sole decision maker, even though that's how we like to portray him in the West. There is he's got a significant military support in the general staff, and then he's got the likes of Lavrov and Rybkov in the foreign ministry. So you know, this thing is he's going to reiterate Russia's demands, and Trump's either going to listen or do what he did in Alaska and not pay attention.
Yeah, it seems that in the last meeting, Donald Trump tried to, you know, negotiate with Vladimir Putin the way that he's going to ease the sanctions, and Vladimir Putin should accept the ceasefire, you know, based on the current front line between the two colonels. Do you think that would be the same position in the new negotiation, new talks that they're planning for?
Donald better start watching what's happening with his buddies over there in the EU. Yesterday, they just passed, and it's got to go through a really pro forma check with I think it's called the Ukraine-EU Association, a rule essentially for the EU that would demand that all EU countries accept Ukrainian grain and other products with no tariff, import duties, or anything else. Poland is going to roll over and play dead to that one. Are you kidding me? Yeah. This is devastating to the farmers in the EU. And that's the kind of thing the EU is doing now to try and, you know, reinforce their message of we're against Moscow and we're for Ukraine. That's disastrous. So this is just going downhill rapidly. It's like a snowball going downhill. And Larry's absolutely right. All Putin's got to do is keep on. He's already won. And pretty soon he's going to turn the lights out in Ukraine, completely turn the lights out. So they'll have to operate their Tomahawks by flashlight.
Larry, FSB, director of FSB in Russia, if I'm not mistaken, FSB, the intelligence in Russia gave information about that the British and Ukrainians are planning to sabotage in Turkish, Turkish stream, the pipeline of
Right.
Turkey. What is that? Do you think these people with this sort of mindset, they're planning to put an end to the conflict? I don't see
No, no,
that
no.
happening in the mind of Europeans.
Yeah, no, they're desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. The Europe right now is the equivalent of a drowning man in the ocean, who's thrashing about trying to grab something to stay afloat. But the Russia has increased the ops tempo, and it looks like last year the general staff wanted to turn off all the lights in Ukraine, but Putin sort of said, "No, let's give it time." Putin now has signed off on that, and Ukraine has already lost 60% of its ability to generate power and sustain electricity. I suspect we're going to see that number creep up around 80-90% within the next 4 to 5 weeks. Then Ukraine's they're back living in the 18th century, and they're going to have to break out the canvas.
Something else, Nima. I was just doing the math in my head, and I'm not too good at that anymore. But he said something about 2,000 Tomahawks. I'm sorry. Last time I checked the inventory, it wasn't even quite that high for the United States. So I don't know where he's going. What's he going to do? Turn to Raytheon, Lockheed, whomever's doing them now, and say, redo that production line and come on, put them on. And he's tried that with some other weaponry, and they have not been very cooperative. They'd love to make the money, but they can't find the places in the country that will accept their ancillary activities to do it. Right. So they're stuck with the production lines that they have, which are basically at what we call LRIP at this time, low rate initial production numbers. They've gone down to where it's just barely profitable to make them. So I don't know where he's getting his information, but it's not from the people who tell the truth.